The Reflection is a gripping psychological thriller that explores the fragile boundary between reality and illusion, guilt and redemption. At its core, the story follows David, a grieving man haunted not just by the loss of his wife, but by the sinister presence of his own reflection, an entity that seems to have a will of its own. The narrative begins in an ordinary setting, a bathroom after a steamy shower, where David first notices something unsettling. His reflection doesn't mimic his movements. Instead, it stares back at him with an eerie awareness, whispering cryptic words that shake him to his core. This moment sets the tone for the entire story, blurring the line between hallucination and supernatural horror. As David seeks help from his therapist, Dr. Evelyn Carter, the audience learns that he is still reeling from the recent death of his wife, Sarah. Flashbacks reveal a heated argument between them before her fatal car accident, hinting at unresolved guilt. The therapist suggests that his visions are stress-induced, but David becomes increasingly convinced that something far more sinister is at play. The story takes a darker turn as David's investigation leads him to uncover a disturbing family secret. His grandfather's journals mention a curse of the shadow self, and old photographs reveal a mysterious figure, the Watcher, lurking in the background of his life. These discoveries suggest that his torment may not be purely psychological, but tied to something ancient and malevolent. The true horror escalates when David's reflection steps out of the mirror, becoming a physical doppelganger. This entity is not just a supernatural foe, but a manifestation of David's deepest regrets and self-loathing. It taunts him with the truth. He was responsible for Sarah's death, having been drunk behind the wheel. The Reflection's goal is clear: to replace David, to become the better version while he fades into nothingness. The climactic confrontation is both physical and psychological. David battles his doppelganger in a desperate struggle for survival, but the real fight is within himself. In the end, he doesn't destroy the reflection, he embraces it. By acknowledging his guilt and forgiving himself, he neutralizes its power. The reflection merges back into the mirror, leaving David with a sense of uneasy peace. Yet, the final shot lingers on the mirror, where his reflection subtly smirks. This chilling ambiguity leaves the audience questioning. Did David truly conquer his demons, or has the reflection won in some unseen way? The reflection embodies David's repressed guilt, forcing him to confront what he has tried to bury. The supernatural versus the mind. Is the reflection a ghostly curse, or is it all in David's fractured psyche? The story masterfully keeps this question unresolved. Redemption through acceptance. David's journey is ultimately about facing his past mistakes rather than running from them. The Reflection is more than a horror story. It's a meditation on grief, guilt, and the terrifying possibility that our worst enemy might be staring back at us in the mirror. The lingering doubt in the final moments ensures that the story stays with the audience long after the last page is turned or the screen fades to black. In The Reflection, the therapist's office is far more than a setting. It is a battleground of truth and denial, a fragile sanctuary where reality bends under the weight of guilt and grief. Dr. Evelyn Carter's sessions with David serve as the story's psychological spine, grounding the supernatural horror in raw, human emotion. From the moment David sits across from her, disheveled and desperate, the room becomes a confessional. The muted colors, the soft hum of a ticking clock, the way the light slants through half-closed blinds, everything in the office feels designed to coax out secrets. But David isn't just a patient recounting nightmares. He's an unreliable narrator, even to himself. When he describes his reflection moving independently, Dr. Carter's calm professionalism masks her growing concern. She grounds his terror in clinical terms: PTSD, dissociative episodes, the mind's way of coping with trauma. Yet the audience senses something she doesn't. The reflection's whispers carry a knowing malice no hallucination should possess. The power of these scenes lies in their duality. On one level, they function as exposition, revealing David's backstory, his wife Sarah's death, the unresolved fight that preceded it, the suffocating guilt he carries. But beneath the surface, the office itself becomes a metaphor for David's crumbling psyche. The framed diplomas on the wall, the orderly notepad in Dr. Carter's lap, these symbols of rationality are at odds with the chaos seeping into David's world. Every time he dismisses her logical explanations, the room seems to darken slightly, as if the shadows resent being dismissed. A pivotal moment occurs when David, mid-session, glances at the office's mirror, a simple decorative touch, and swears his reflection winks at him. Dr. Carter sees nothing, but the terror on David's face is real. Here, the story weaponizes the therapist's role. She is both lifeline and obstacle. Her insistence on scientific rationale forces David to doubt his own eyes, isolating him further. The audience is left to wonder. Is she helping him avoid descent into madness, or is she blinding him to a truth too terrible to name? By the story's climax, the therapist's office takes on a tragic irony. Dr. Carter's notes, once a tool for healing, become a record of David's unraveling. Her final session with him ends not with a breakthrough, but with David storming out, rejecting her framework of grief and guilt. The empty chair he leaves behind mirrors his own hollowed-out soul. In the end, the office stands as a monument to the limits of human understanding, a place where logic meets the unthinkable and loses. The therapist's office works because it's a closed ecosystem of tension. Unlike the supernatural horrors lurking in mirrors, the dangers here are quiet. A misplaced word, a suppressed memory, the dawning realization that some wounds defy analysis. It's the horror of being truly seen, yet still misunderstood. When David's reflection finally steps into the real world, part of us wonders if it was born not in the bathroom mirror, but in that leather armchair, under the therapist's gentle, futile gaze. As David steps beyond the therapist's office and into his own private investigation, the reflection shifts from psychological drama to something far more unsettling, a man hunting a shadow that might be hunting him. This is where the story's spine truly stiffens, where David's grief curdles into obsession, and where the audience realizes the horror isn't confined to mirrors. It's leaking into the world. The investigation begins in the way these things often do for the broken and the desperate, with small, feverish compulsions. David starts documenting anomalies. He takes photographs of mirrors only to find blurred figures where his reflection should be. He records himself sleeping, and the footage shows his body rising at 3:07 a.m. each night to stand motionless before the bathroom mirror, lips moving in silent conversation. These discoveries carry the queasy thrill of self-destruction. David isn't just searching for answers, he's peeling back his own sanity like layers of dead skin. Then there are the artifacts, the physical evidence that roots the horror in something tangible. His grandfather's journal, brittle with age, speaks of a hungry twin that lives in silvered glass. Census records show a black mark next to his great-uncle's name, a man who supposedly drowned in a basin of water shallow enough to lap at one's ankles. These fragments suggest a lineage of hauntings, but the true terror lies in their ambiguity. Are these clues to a supernatural curse, or simply the ravings of men who, like David, couldn't bear the weight of their own guilt? The investigation takes a darker turn when David notices the Watcher, a figure that appears in the periphery of his life. At first, it's just a shape in the background of photos, a blur at the edge of vision. But soon, the figure grows bolder. David glimpses it in crowded streets, its face always half turned away. Security footage from a convenience store shows it standing behind him at the register, its reflection clearly visible in the bulletproof glass, while its physical form casts no shadow. The rules of reality are eroding, and David is no longer the investigator. He's the subject. What makes this section so chilling is its inversion of the detective story. Normally, clues lead to answers. Here, each discovery only deepens the mystery and tightens the noose. When David finally corners an antique shop owner who recognizes the Watcher's description, the old man doesn't offer exposition. He spits on the floor and whispers, "It's not following you. It's waiting for you to see it properly." The investigation doesn't culminate in a revelation. It culminates in the understanding that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. By the time David's reflection steps out of the mirror to greet him, the audience realizes the truth. This was never an investigation. It was a courtship. Every photograph analyzed, every archive dug through, every sleepless night spent chasing shadows. All of it was simply David learning how to see what had been watching him all along. This phase of the story works because it mirrors our own relationship with the unknown. Like David, we're conditioned to believe that scrutiny leads to mastery. But the reflection subverts that instinct, turning the investigative process into a kind of self-haunting. The more David learns, the less he understands, until the only remaining truth is the one he's been running from. Some reflections don't just show us who we are, they show us what we're becoming. The moment when David uncovers his family's cursed history is where the reflection stops being a ghost story and becomes an exhumation. This isn't just about a man haunted by his grief. It's about generations of guilt, seeping through time like a stain no amount of repentance can bleach out. The revelation doesn't come in a single thunderclap of horror, but in slow, sickening waves, each more suffocating than the last. It begins with something mundane, an old key tucked inside his grandfather's pocket watch, fitting a lockbox buried in the attic. Inside, brittle newspaper clippings whisper of tragedies too precise to be coincidental. A great-aunt who swore her twin sister crawled out of a full-length mirror the night before vanishing. A cousin found dead, with his face submerged in a bowl of water barely deep enough to wet his lips. The documents carry the musty weight of institutional indifference. Coroners ruled them accidents, priests called them demonic, but the family knew. They always knew. Then comes the journal. His grandfather's handwriting starts as measured recollections. A boyhood in a house where mirrors were draped in black cloth. His mother's warning that the glass remembers, but deteriorates into frantic scrawls. The entries speak of a ritual to contain something called the other, instructions involving silver and shattered glass, and the sacrifice of memory. Most chilling is the final page, where the elegant script collapses into a childlike tremor. It got Thomas. It wears him now. I see my brother smiling at supper with our mother's eyes. David's investigation takes on a new desperation. He tracks down surviving relatives, their voices wary over crackling phone lines. An elderly second cousin recounts the family's old practice of covering mirrors during thunderstorms, not out of superstition, but because lightning made them hungry. A faded photograph of his great-grandparents' wedding reveals a blurred figure standing among the guests. its face a smudged absence, its hand resting possessively on the groom's shoulder. The true horror crystallizes when David realizes the pattern. Every generation, one member of his family becomes a vessel. The reflection isn't just a specter, it's an inheritance. His grandfather didn't suffer from dementia when he smashed every mirror in the nursing home. He was trying to protect David. The car crash that killed Sarah wasn't an accident. It was the latest sacrifice in a bloodline where love and loss are just steps in a ritual older than memory. What makes this revelation so devastating is its inevitability. David didn't stumble into this horror. He was born into it. His grief over Sarah, his guilt, his very identity as a man seeking redemption, all of it was fertile ground for something that has been waiting in the glass for generations. The dark past isn't just revealed, it claims him. When his reflection finally steps free, it doesn't feel like an invasion. It feels like a homecoming. This is where the reflection transcends personal horror and becomes something ancestral. The audience realizes with dawning dread that David was never fighting his own demons. He was fighting his grandfather's, his father's, and now the fight is his to lose. The moment arrives not with a crescendo of thunder or a shattering of glass, but in the terrible quiet of a bathroom at 3 a.m., where David stands barefoot on cold tile, staring into a mirror that no longer obeys the laws of reflection. This is no longer a haunting, it is an unveiling. The thing wearing his face has grown tired of whispers and half-glimpsed movements. Tonight, it steps forward. What makes this confrontation so harrowing is its intimacy. There are no weapons here, no holy artifacts or ancient incantations, just a man and the embodiment of every secret he's ever buried. When the reflection places its palms against the glass and pushes, the surface doesn't crack. It parts like water, and the air smells suddenly of ozone and funeral lilies. The doppelganger's first words aren't a snarl or a threat, but a sigh of relief. You have no idea how long I've waited to breathe. The struggle that follows defies physical logic. They grapple not as two separate beings, but as a single entity warring with itself. When David's fist connects with the doppelganger's jaw, his own mouth fills with blood. The reflection doesn't fight like a demon, but like someone who knows every weakness, every regret. It reminds him of Sarah's last gasp for air, of the way the steering wheel bent under his drunken grip. The real horror dawns when David realizes this isn't an invasion, it's an eviction. Mirrors throughout the house begin weeping tarnished silver, the liquid pooling into letters that form a single word: choose. The reflection explains the terrible arithmetic of their bloodline. One must always remain trapped, not as punishment, but as preservation. David's grandfather had sealed away his own twin, just as generations before had done. The reflection isn't evil, it's starving for the life it was denied. In the end, David doesn't win through violence, but through the one thing the reflection can't mimic: genuine remorse. He kneels in the spreading silver, whispering his wife's name like a sacrament. The doppelganger's triumphant grin falters. It hadn't accounted for this, that a broken man's love might be heavier than his guilt. The mirrors shriek as the reflection dissolves into smoke, but as it fades, David hears its final words, not in malice, but in something like gratitude. Finally, someone looked. The true genius of this confrontation lies in its false resolution. As dawn breaks, David stares into a normal mirror, touching his unbloodied face. But the audience sees what he doesn't. The reflection's pupils remain ever so slightly dilated, its breaths coming a half-second after David's. The victory was never about destroying the darkness. It was about learning to share the light. The story does not end with David's triumph, but with his surrender, not to the reflection, but to the terrible understanding that some truths cannot be unlearned. The final act is not a battle, but a quiet, inevitable merging. After the confrontation, the house settles into an eerie calm. The mirrors no longer distort, the whispers cease, and David begins to believe he has won. He sleeps through the night, dreams of Sarah's laughter, wakes without the weight of dread. But the world has shifted in subtle ways. Strangers glance at him a beat too long. His coffee tastes faintly of copper, and sometimes when he passes a shop window, his reflection lingers after he has walked away. The true horror of the last reflection is not that David loses, but that he stops fighting. One evening, as he stands before the bathroom mirror, the same one where this nightmare began, he realizes with chilling clarity, the reflection is no longer his enemy. It is his confessor, his witness, the only thing that truly knows the depths of his guilt. When it reaches for him this time, he does not flinch. Their fingers meet in the glass, and the barrier dissolves like mist. What happens next is not possession, but something far more intimate, an assimilation. David's memories blur with those of the generations before him. He sees his grandfather as a young man, weeping as he smashes a handheld mirror, sealing away his own twin. He feels the terror of his great-aunt as she plunged her hands into liquid silver, trying to pull her sister back into the glass. And Sarah, oh, Sarah, her final moments replay not as a nightmare, but as a shared burden between man and reflection. The thing in the mirror was never trying to replace him. It was trying to remember for him. The final scene is a masterpiece of quiet horror. David stands before a full-length mirror in an empty house, his reflection perfect in every detail. But when he turns to leave, the reflection remains, watching him go with a smile that is neither cruel nor kind, simply knowing. The camera pulls back to reveal the truth. The man walking away is the reflection, and the figure in the glass is the original David, trapped at last. The true terror lies in its ambiguity. Was this always the cycle, an endless loop of reflections replacing their originals? Or did David, in his grief, choose to let the reflection take his place, to wander the world unburdened while he remains in the glass, finally free of guilt? The mirrors do not answer. They simply wait for the next desperate soul to peer too long into their depths. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.